So, for your mid question, here it is. What are your thoughts about the Inquisition? Do you think that it was okay for the church to do what they did? Now, here's the prompt on the bottom. You should really start it off like this. I believe the Inquisition was blank because blank. Be sure to give evidence, reasoning, why you believe what you do. If you just give me this one sentence, you will not get your full credit. Be sure to give a reason why you believe that it was okay or it wasn't okay. Now we're going to go over the early American civilization. Now, the stuff we're going to be talking about is things that's been going on during the time of the Greeks and Romans all the way up until the Black Death. And this will tie in later on with future lessons, so just be sure to keep this in mind. Okay, so we're going to start off with the Olmecs. Now, the Olmecs, they, if you look on the map to your right, you will see a little orange area. That's the area they controlled. And they were around from 1200 BC to 400 BC. So for about 800 years, they were around. Okay, near their end, because of conquest and fighting and things like that, they eventually went away. And for about 700 years, there was no really big empire that grew. That is until the Mayans. Now, the Mayans, they were very unique. Now, what made them very, very unique was that they had a lot of temples and they had a lot of um, central hubs, if you want to use the words, um, that they didn't have just one capital. They had different places, like major areas. And if you look on the map to the right, you will see several of them. You will see about 5 of them. Okay. The other thing that people really were interested in about the Mayans was their calendar. Now, the calendar started at 3114 BC and it ended specifically on December 23rd, 2012. Now, some people believe that the Mayans thought that the world started at 3114 BC and that the world was going to end December 23rd, 2012. But as we now know, that didn't happen. Now, the other belief was because the Mayans were so good in mathematics and astronomy that they knew it was dealing something with the stars. Okay, now again, the Mayans were very good in math. They understood, they were the first civilization in the world to understand the concept of zero. Because everybody else, the Greeks, Romans, people in Europe and Asia, they started their numbers with one, because one was something. Whereas the Mayans understood that even when you start something, there has to be nothing at the very beginning, and that's zero, the concept of zero, the absolute value of nothing. Um, they understood that, and they were the first civilization to use zero. Now, the thing is, the Mayans, a little known thing was that they had slaves. Now, when they conquered an area, the lower class people, the peasants, if you want to use the word, they were slaves. They were made slaves. But the upper class and the war leaders, the topper people in the uh, civilizations they conquered, those people were actually sacrificed. Okay, now I know some people confuse this kind of facts with another group we're going to be talking about in a little bit, but it's true. The Mayans sacrificed people, but they didn't just sacrifice anybody, it was the top people. Now, I was telling you about how the Mayans had little hubs all around, again on the map. Those were city states. And the thing was, um, they were spread around. You know, they were their own place. They could run, sufficiently by themselves. without the head government people, the priestess interfering. Okay, but the thing was around 885, 895 AD, their civilization started to decline. And once it went away, nobody knows exactly why they went away, but once it did, the jungle basically started reclaiming the land and it started growing over the temples. And it wasn't until later that when the temples were rediscovered and they were truly appreciated that they were cleared, and now it's amazing. They're beautiful pictures of the temples now. Now, shortly after the Mayans went away, another group came in, and these were the Toltecs. And they were around for about 200 years, from 950 AD to 1150 AD. Now, if you look on the map, just above the Valley of Mexico, you'll see this thing called Tula. That was the center of their empire. Now, thing is, they conquered. Even though they were only around for about 200 years, they conquered quickly. And they went all the way down to Guatemala. Okay. Now, the other thing that was unique about the Toltecs was they knew and they learned how to shape and the value of minerals from the earth, such as gold, silver, and copper. Now, later on, this would hurt the next group once people started coming from Europe. Okay. Now, the thing was at 1125 AD, they started to decline because they were spread out everywhere and they made a lot of enemies. And once word spread that they were thinned out, the people they conquered and the people that they might be conquering next basically overran them, and they would eventually go away. Now, one of the most famous groups at this time was the Aztecs. Now, they were around from 1325 to 1521 AD, just shy of 200 years. Now, the legend goes like this. In the 1100s, there was a large migration of the natives, and they were walking around looking for a specific spot. Now, a priest um, basically had this vision, a specific image in his head of where to settle because he heard it. Basically, he took the dream as coming from the gods. And so they wandered and they basically found their area because the image in the dream was of an eagle chewing on a serpent or a snake on top of a cactus. And the people saw this uh, on the island of Texcoco. And on that island, they built their civilization. And that civilization town became known as Tenochtitlan. Now, again, this is on an island. They started building the central hub of their empire, and they used an aqueduct system to create roadways to connect to other little islands. Now, the thing was, the only people else in the world who did something remotely like this was the people in Venice, Italy. And when the European conquerors came to see Tenochtitlan and they saw the aqueduct system, as you see in that picture to your right, they were amazed that how can these savages, the words they used, savages, these people who they thought were dumb, how could they make a city on top of water? And it just baffled the Spaniards, the conquerors. And we'll be getting to that later on. Now, the thing was, the Aztecs, they were not the big dominant group that a lot of people think they were. They actually had help. Now, they formed an alliance with two groups, the Texcoco and the Teocapan. And they were basically partnered up until 1519. Now, when the Aztecs conquered, they demanded tribute from the people they conquered. Now, this tribute could come in forms of goods, such as food, you know, jewelry, things like that, or money. Now, the thing was, money is not like how you think of it now, where it's dollar bills and things like that. No, it was more like valued items. So when the Toltecs, again, when they came around, they had gold, silver, and copper stuff. So these people they conquered, they had this gold, silver, and copper things, and the Aztec was basically telling them, cough it up, or else we're gonna eliminate you. So a lot of the places they paid the tribute because again the Aztecs were a very very powerful group. Now around 1500, um, the population of the Aztec Empire was about 4 million people in the Valley of Mexico. Now most of these people they were the common people, and the common people worked as farmers. Now if you were a male and you came from a higher class, you were able to go to school and you were taught military training. Now, this is crucial because the common people, they had no choices. They basically had to go into farming. But if the male of nobilities, they went to school and they had military training, they had a choice. They can either continue serving in the military, they could be in the government, or they could be in the priesthood. Now, the last group I'm going to be talking about are the Incas. Now, unlike the Aztecs and Toltecs and Mayans, the Incas were not in Mexico. They were actually in Chile, current day Chile in South America. But they were around from 1438 to 1532. Now, their population was about 12 million people. And the thing was, they forced people to join the army. It wasn't a choice. You were forced to be in the army. Now, the other thing about them was that their nobles, their upper class people, were put in control of areas. They were put in control of areas that were just conquered, and once they had control, it was theirs. But there was only one requirement. They had to show loyalty to the king. That was it. As long as they showed loyalty, they could do what they want. Now, the citizens were required to serve in labor forces. Now, this means that they had to work in the fields. Now, depending on the place, it could be the season could be something as small as a couple weeks, but sometimes it could be more. The other thing that was very unique about the Incas was that they had a vast network of roads, and it stretched about 24,800 miles. The other interesting thing was that the women could be priestess. Now the priests are basically the upper level. In a lot of civilizations back then, not only on the American side, but in the Europe and Asian side, they didn't let women get that high up. And the last really noteworthy thing about the Incas was they didn't have a writing system. So the way they communicated was through a system of knots on a string. Now this is your last question. It says, based off your prior knowledge and what you've learned today, which Mesoamerican civilization do you feel was the most impressive? Give 2 reasons why. Was it the Olmecs, the Mayans, Toltecs, Aztecs, or Incas? And you should really start off your writing with, I believe that the blank were a more impressive civilization because, and then give your 2 reasons. Be sure that is complete sentences, or else you will not get full credit. Okay guys, so that's the end of the video. Hope to see you in class, and I'm sure you did a great job. Don't forget to turn it in to the black basket. Okay? Have a good day, guys.